The silence following a breakup with an avoidant partner doesn't just quiet a room, it alters the fundamental atmosphere of a person's life, leaving a heavy, ringing void where intense emotion used to live. For months, or perhaps even years, you were the one who held the emotional perimeter of the relationship together, constantly reaching across an invisible chasm while they retreated further into their fortress of independence. You learned to read the subtle shifts in their posture, the coldness in their text messages, and the sudden, unannounced retreats that always left you questioning your own worth and sanity. They operated under a deeply ingrained psychological assumption that you would always be there, acting as an emotional anchor while they floated in safe isolation, completely convinced that your warmth was a permanent, unconditional fixture they could tap into whenever they chose to return. They viewed your persistent efforts to connect not as a sign of deep, resilient strength, NGTH, but as a form of predictable dependency, mistakenly believing that because you cared so intensely, you were inherently incapable of walking away. This fundamental misunderstanding is exactly what sets the stage for a psychological reckoning they never saw coming, an absolute disruption of their entire emotional matrix. When an empathetic partner finally reaches their absolute limit and decides to sever the tie completely, it triggers a catastrophic shift in the avoidant's internal world, exposing vulnerabilities they have spent a lifetime trying to hide behind walls of detached indifference. You see, the avoidant partner lives by a strict unconscious rulebook designed entirely around self-preservation, where vulnerability is equated with immediate danger and emotional distance is treated as absolute safety. Every time you tried to get closer, their internal alarm system went off, prompting them to push you away, shut down, or use minimizing strategies to convince themselves that they didn't need you or anyone else to feel complete. They mistook your empathy for weakness, assuming your capacity to forgive and your desire to heal wounds meant you were trapped by your own big heart. They grew comfortable in the predictable rhythm of the anxious-avoidant trap, fully expecting that no matter how far they retreated into their shell, you would still be standing outside, waiting patiently for a glimpse of affection. But they completely failed to realize that an empath's patience is not an endless, bottomless resource. It is a conscious investment in potential, a deliberate choice to see the best in someone until the cost of doing so threatens to completely erase their own identity. When that threshold is crossed, the dynamics don't just shift slightly, they reverse with a terrifying, absolute finality that leaves the avoidant partner completely disoriented. The exact moment the empath decides to walk away marks the beginning of an entirely unmapped psychological RIA. Liddy for the avoidant, an experience for which their defenses have no pre-built strategy. For the first time, they find themselves standing in an empty room where your warmth used to be, forced to confront the sudden, chilling realization that their walls didn't just keep you out, they successfully locked them inside their own profound isolation. As the hours turn into days, the initial relief they expected to feel from getting their space back completely fails to materialize, replaced instead by a creeping, suffocating sense of abandonment that shatters their carefully constructed illusion of self-sufficiency. They are left with nothing but the haunting echo of the final conversation, a moment where they expected tears and pleading but were met instead with a calm, quiet, and utterly resolute goodbye that signaled the permanent death of your investment. It is a psychological shockwave that penetrates the deepest layers of their subconscious, forcing them to face a terrifying truth. Why didn't win the game of distance, they simply succeeded in entirely losing the only person who was ever willing to fight for their soul. But right here, at the precise 60-second mark of this emotional unraveling, lies a hidden psychological trapdoor that almost no one sees coming, a twist in the human mind so powerful that it completely alters how the avoidant views everything they thought they knew about love and survival. There is a secret reason why this specific breakup doesn't just hurt them, but completely rewires their brain, driving them to a state of near obsessive fixation on the very person they spent months trying to avoid. To understand why this happens, we have to look directly into the darkest, most hidden corner of the avoidant attachment style, a place where their greatest strength secretly transforms into their absolute downfall. To truly understand the depth of this shock, we have to look at what happens behind closed doors when the avoidant partner is left entirely alone with their own thoughts, stripped of the daily validation your presence used to provide. In the immediate aftermath, their primary defense mechanism is deactivate a psychological process where they suppress memories, focus entirely on your perceived flaws, and tell themselves a comforting story about how they are finally free to live without pressure. They might go out more, dive headfirst into work, or plunge into superficial distractions, desperately trying to convince themselves and the world that your departure has had absolutely zero impact on their internal state. They wear this mask of unbothered independence like armor, confidently believing that they have successfully dodged a bullet and regained total control over their life. But this initial phase is nothing more than an emotional waiting room, a temporary buffer created by a brain that is profoundly terrified of processing genuine grief. The real trouble begins when the distractions inevitably start to lose their novelty and the quiet moments of the night begin to stretch out, long and completely unforgiving. It is during these silent hours that the psychological weight of the empath's absence begins to crack the avoidance armor, chip by painful chip. They start to notice the stark difference between ordinary attention and the profound, soulful attunement that you uniquely brought into their life. An empath doesn't just participate in a relationship, they create a safe psychological sanctuary, an environment where a partner's deepest, most hidden flaws are met with understanding rather than immediate judgment. The avoidant, who spent their entire life believing they were fundamentally unlovable or destined to be let down, had secretly grown deeply reliant on this sanctuary, using your unwavering belief in them as a silent shield against their own deep-seated self-doubt. Now, with the sanctuary abruptly closed and the keys permanently taken away, they are forced to look at themselves in the mirror without the distorting, beautiful lens of your love, and the view is utterly terrifying. As the weeks pass, a phenomenon known as delayed emotional processing begins to take hold of the avoidant psyche, catching them completely off guard. While an anxious or empathetic partner processes grief in real-time, crying, screaming, reflecting, and actively feeling the full weight of the pain from day one, the avoidant pushes it deep into their subconscious. Because of this, by the time the avoidance defenses finally fatigue and collapse, the empath has often already moved through the heaviest waves of sorrow and is beginning to rebuild their life. When the wall finally breaks for the avoidant, the grief doesn't hit them as a gradual wave, it hits them as an absolute tidal wave of pure, unfiltered regret. They find themselves suddenly flooded with vivid memories of your kindness, your laughter, and the quiet moments of safety they completely took for granted while they were too busy, plotting their next escape. They reach for their phone to text you, driven by a sudden, desperate urge to restore the connection, only to realize that the digital boundary you have set is just as unyielding as the emotional one. This is the moment where the ultimate shock truly mutates into something agonizingly permanent, the realization of your complete indifference. Throughout the relationship, the avoidant was entirely used to your emotional reactions or frustration, your tears, your endless attempts to talk things through. To them, those reactions were proof that they still held absolute power over your emotional state, a reassurance that they could pull the strings whenever they wanted. But when an empath dumps an avoidant, they don't do it out of anger or a desire to play a game. They do it because they have fundamentally realized that staying means sacrificing their own soul. They walk away with a quiet, devastating stillness that carries no malice, no spite, and absolutely no desire for revenge. When the avoidant attempts to reach out, to test the waters, or to drop a casual breadcrumb of attention, they aren't met with an angry confrontation. They are met with the cold, dead silence of a closed door or a polite, entirely detached response that treats them like a distant acquaintance. This total lack of emotional reactivity from the empath completely scrambles the avoidant's internal compass, destroying their psychological equilibrium. They are forced to confront the fact that they are no longer the center of your universe, that their ability to cause you pain has completely evaporated, and that you have successfully reclaimed your energy and focused it back on yourself. This realization triggers a profound identity crisis within the avoidant, shattering their core belief that they are uniquely special, untouchable, and always the one in control of the narrative. They begin to obsess over your new life, checking your social media, asking mutual friends about you, and desperately searching for any sign that you are secretly suffering just as much as they are. But the more they look, the more they see a person who is not drowning in sorrow, but rather someone who is steadily blooming, rediscovering their passion, and radiating a genuine hard-won peace that has absolutely nothing to do with them. The ultimate irony of this dynamic is that the avoidant partner only truly values the empath's love once it has been rendered completely unattainable. Their attachment system is designed to crave connection only when the threat of actual vulnerability is entirely removed. meaning they feel the most profound attraction when the other person is safely out of reach. Suddenly, you are no longer the suffocating or demanding partner they needed to escape from you, or the one who got away. The rare, golden soul they foolishly traded for a lifetime of empty, superficial freedom. They become haunted by the terrifying realization that they blew the one genuine shot at a deep, authentic relationship, and that the independence they fought so desperately to protect is actually just a cold, lonely prison of their own making. They are left to live with the permanent, torturous question of what could have been if they had just possessed the courage to lower their walls, look you in the eyes, and match your beautiful empathy with their own vulnerability. What is the single most painful lesson you had to learn about yourself before you finally found the strength to walk away from someone who refused to love you back?